Wine. It's simply crushed and fermented grapes. It's the variations and the stories that make it so fascinating. Wine grapes grow all over our planet. The same grape grown in one part of the world might taste dramatically different when grown in another part of the globe. Even within a single region, you find differences in soils, climate, weather, elevations, all of which impact the grape, making it taste different when it finally arrives in your glass. This beverage has the ability to tell you the story of a year in the place that it calls home. Home for wine grapes is typically beautiful, from the high desert of the Yakima Valley to the evergreen forest of Oregon or the beautiful southern highlands region of Australia. Wine likes a view. These regions are often off the beaten path, and the scenery you go through to reach them can be stunning. And perhaps even more important than any of this are the stories of the wineries, the journeys of the winemakers and the people who love these wines, their philosophies, and the different ways they bring their reverence to the grape. In this series, we explore different wine regions around the globe. We want to give you a feel for the place and region. We will visit the regions, speak with the winemakers, taste their wines, and then bring a bottle home to create a recipe that pairs perfectly. Our goal is to inspire you to take the scenic route. Today, we visit another of the nested AVAs in Oregon's Willamette Valley. We are off to Lenné Estate in the Yamhill-Carlton AVA. The Yamhill-Carlton AVA is a horseshoe-shaped bowl that faces south. The North Yamhill River flows through the region, cutting through this valley filled with orchards, fields of grain, and nurseries. This area was originally forestry and farming land, but now the hillsides have become the home to vineyards making some of the world's finest Pinot Noir. The area is protected from the wind and rain by the Coast Range Mountains to the west, Chehalem Mountain to the north, and Dundee to the east. This protection and the marine sedimentary soils that are the oldest in the region create some of the darkest, deepest Pinot Noirs in the Willamette Valley. These wines are silky in your mouth with fruit notes of raspberry, blackberry, and black cherry. You will find enticing notes of tobacco, coffee, and dark chocolate, with floral notes like violet and rose. The Yamhill-Carlton AVA was founded in 2005 and covers an area of 60,000 acres. Here you will find 52 wineries and 110 vineyards, over 2,500 planted acres. We visited Lenné Estate, which is located in the northeast part of the AVA, near the town of Yamhill. Driving into the property, you are transported to the French countryside. Their tasting room is surrounded by gardens. The lavender was blooming when we visited. The building evokes the feeling of centuries-old stone cottages in France. It is not ostentatious. It has a welcoming quality, like you're being invited into a charming French home in the country. The patio out front has beautiful views of the lower part of the vineyard and the Yamhill-Carlton area. We began our visit with a vineyard tour with owner and winemaker Steve Lutz. Steve is immensely proud of his pea vine soils. He brags that his vineyard has the poorest soils in Yamhill County. Vines here must work hard and prove themselves to survive. The 20-acre vineyard sits between 300 and 600 feet in elevation. You notice that when you walk from halfway up in the vineyard to the top. It is steep. Those pea vine soils? When Steve planted in 2001, he lost 35% of his newly planted vines in the first year. In addition, the steep slope made working the vineyard difficult. He named this early block Kill Hill. He persevered, and the mature vines have burrowed deep into the subsoil. The roots find water and nutrients, but the poor soil keeps down the canopy growth, and the vines focus on producing fruit. The clusters of fruit here are small with small berries. This gives Steve more skin-to-juice ratio, which imparts concentrated flavor into his wines.
So these, as you can see, we're kind of in the middle of veraison here. Mm-hmm. And so we're pretty much, everything we do in the vineyard is done now, except for one more pass. And that's just probably in about 10 days, maybe a week. We'll see what happens with this heat. Probably 10 days. We'll go through and we'll make a green pass. So we'll basically just cut the clusters that are lagging, that aren't, like you can see some of these plants are almost completely through.
Yeah. Wow.
And then some plants are really lagging behind. If you looked at this fruit, you would see that even the veraison, even the ones that are going through veraison, they're still pretty hard.
Oh, right.
So they're not really susceptible to shrivel right now. But then, 3 weeks from now, when we start getting into the meat of the ripening, and we're going to ripen early, so it's really problematic because we can't have early heat in September, and this year, God knows what we're going to have, But normally what happens, we pick towards the end of September. In September, after the first week in September, things really start to cool down quite dramatically. So we hope we have a big cool down at the beginning of September. It's not unusual for us to get some 90-degree weather the first week of September, but usually after the first week, the weather pattern really starts changing here. And so maybe we'll change earlier than that. Who knows what we're going to get this year? So, people always ask you, what's this year look like? And you always say, well, ask me, 2 days before harvest, and I'll give you a pretty accurate assessment. You just don't know. But it would be nice to see, we're obviously not going to see any rainfall until September. And I wouldn't even mind seeing a little bit of rainfall early in September, although I just want to see cool from here on out. If we get some nice cool weather at the beginning of September, we should have really a nice harvest. I mean, we got plenty of fruit. We've had plenty of heat to kind of get it ripe, I think. And we've got time, so even if it cools down, we've got time because we're so early. So ideal scenario would be just to let everything cool down, and we just let it hang like well into September, even towards the end of September. I don't know that that'll happen, but we'll see. As you see, we probably have, just by looking at it, and normally we would pull out somewhere between, around 35 tons of fruit here. We've probably got low 40s, I'm guessing 41, 42 tons of fruit in here. So it's a big fruit set, which is really good because last year we had a horrible fruit set. Last year we pulled out 16 tons of fruit from the vineyard, which was nuts. That's just the crazy that was the worst fruit set ever. And it was kind of a good thing because it was, it was smoke tainted. Not in a horrible, severe way, but we're not making any of our high-end wines out of last year. And it was really a lush, beautiful vintage, other than the smoke taint in the soil. But if you're not familiar with how this is, I don't know, you guys maybe are familiar with how Pinot Noir vineyards are farmed, but these are all, this is all kind of like it's done in Burgundy. It's a vertical trellising system. We basically have 7x3 spacing, so our rows are 7 feet apart. Our plants are 3 feet apart, which is pretty tight. But it's really works perfect for what we're doing. So we leave about 10 canes on each vine, and we all position them vertically up this trellis. The guys come in and move the catch wires and tie them, and then, we're just trying to expose all these leaves to sunlight and then keep the canopy, keep airflow down here through the fruiting zone. So we basically, and then we pull all the leaves on the east portion of the plant, which we have done. And then we hedge them, which is done about 2 weeks ago. We go through and hedge everything to stop the growth of the vine, and just because we only need 24 leaves to ripen a cluster. So, and then we're pretty much done, basically. Other than that, it's just fruit dropping. So once we drop the fruit, we'll just wait till harvest, basically, and pull it all in. So, and then the way these are planted, we have plenty of room here to stage bins. We stage bins here and at the top and the bottom, and we pick to the top, the middle, and the bottom, and just haul it all out of here and put it on a truck, and off it goes. So. Hopefully it, when you get towards harvest, it all gets a little, this is where the gophers dug it up, and, it's all old ocean floor. So this is all siltstone and sandstone, and you just get, big blocks of this kind of compressed siltstone and sandstone when you dig it up. So that the whole vineyard looks like this. Every place we've ever dug a hole, this is what we get. I mean, we love it. We love our soil here. It just really makes for interesting wine. You know, we get these small, thick-skinned berries here. And I love to come to this block because you can see the soil color here. It changed. So this is, we have just a tiny bit of volcanic soil here. And that's what this is. You know, these volcanoes spewed a little bit of stuff, and some just landed right here, and it weathered over the years. Most of it's old ocean floor. This is different. So, which is really kind of interesting. It's this story. It's that red, you know,
right? The red with the iron.
So our property rolls off here. It rolls off. We have about 2.5, 3 acres over in the woods here. And we have a big flat spot below here where we've been doing some work. We're, you know, thinking eventually about putting a wine building there. In fact, we're going to try to do it this year, but this was such a bad year to build. So this is Kill Hill.
Gotcha.
And we have a big spring in the middle.
Okay.
And but this is a real severe part of the vineyard, a very tough, especially this corner is really tough. So this is all 667 over here, and this is 114 here.
Gotcha.
Now next year, after a big fruit set, we're probably going to have to go through and add some calcium and things to help these vines. Yeah, these mountain vineyards really aren't geared to set this amount of fruit.
Right.
They basically just say, oh my God, we want to survive. We can't keep doing this year after year.
After our vineyard tour, we sat with Steve to taste some of his wines. Set up on the patio overlooking the lower vineyard with a beautiful cheese and charcuterie board, Steve told us about the history of Lenné Estate.
This is definitely is a labor of love. And I mean, again, in Oregon, you kind of get this stuff now. We're, you know, people who are much closer not only to their wine, but to their vineyard, to their building. I mean, we've done, you know, my marks all over this building. I mean, we built this overhang. The guy that does my spraying, he and I built this overhang together. We built those little outbuildings. I've done all the rock work in the interior. We put in the whole landscaping system here, an irrigation system, which we're about ready to change again. But so, yeah, it's just, you know, and you get that in Oregon, which is why I love Oregon. It, you know, the bigger the business gets, the more removed it gets in a way. And so that's really one of the great fun things about Oregon. I'm not even sure that you could do it the way I did it now if you came in and did it. Maybe you could, it'd be different. But there's a lot of us like me here who in Oregon, which is really fun.
So did your father-in-law, Lenny, did he know that you named the winery after him, or was it sort of?
No. He so the way this got named is that my wife grew up on a small chicken farm in about 40 minutes southwest of London in England, and there was this, and he subsequently sold that farm to some developers because it's become a really desirable area to put high-end homes on. And I mean, it's really a desirable area in England for people to want to live. And so some developers bought most of it except for the house that they grew up in, and they put some high-end homes on the farm. And like when he died, the kids didn't realize that he had any money, but he had a little bit of money socked away from the sale. And for a long time, and so when he died in 99, he left my wife a little bit of money and her brother and sister a little bit of money. And so it was enough to kind of go out and look for a piece of rural land. And my wife's dream was to get a little house somewhere out in the country. And so I said, well, if we're going to go look for rural land, we might as well look for land that's appropriate to put a vineyard on. And so here we are 21 years later. We still don't have the house. We've got the land and the taste room and the vineyard. So that's kind of the way it evolved. But I wanted to use him in the marketing from early on. So we were going to call it Nash Grove Lane because that was the little street that she grew up. That was the little lane that was in front of their farm. And I had this whole idea for this label of this kind of little girl kicking up puddles, you know, and just to make it kind of whimsical. But it wasn't quite sitting right with me. And then I was looking at the picture of him when he was about my age. It was this black and white picture, and I was looking at this picture and I went, Lennae, it just popped into my head one day, and I thought, perfect. I thought, we're not going to call it Nash Grove Lane, Lennae. And I thought, I'm going to take a silhouette of that picture and put it on the label, and that's going to be our brand. So my wife came home, and I had the picture there, and I looked at her, I said, guess what? I was so excited. I said, we're not going to call it Nash Grove Lane. I said, we're going to call it Lennae. And she looked at me, and she looked at the picture. She says, does that have something to do with my dad? And I thought she was just going to go, oh my God, you're such a genius, and get on her knees and say, I said, yeah, we're going to name it after your dad. It's perfect. I know the label. It just ties in. We have a story. And she said, oh no, that's not going to happen. We had a very difficult relationship. And I said, you don't realize it's got to happen. So anyway, she was really, really she was really afraid that people would think that she was like a daddy's girl and inherited this money and blah, blah, blah. But after about 3 weeks, she said, fine, that's fine. And she finally agreed.
You persisted.
And we just did it. Yeah, it was really simple then, because we knew it just made sense. And it was really easy to remember, Lennae. It wasn't a very difficult name. I just loved everything about it. And so, yeah, here we are, 20 years later.
Steve's primary focus is Pinot Noir. This grape has many mutations and can be finicky. Here's a bit of background on this variety. The best-known Pinot Noirs come from Bourgogne, or Burgundy, in east-central France. This region grows some of the most expensive wines on the planet. The grapes come from small vineyard parcels owned by many different people. The Napoleonic Code of Inheritance dictated that land was to be inherited equally by all heirs. This means that each generation, vineyards are divided into smaller and smaller plots owned by siblings. In the Côte de Nuit in Bourgogne, 90% of the planted vines are Pinot Noir, but this grape that loves cooler weather grows all over the globe. Pinot is especially prone to mutation. You see this with the mutations of Pinot Noir to Pinot Blanc and Pinot Gris. Beyond these major color variations, there are small variations, some created naturally, some propagated. These are the clones. Some are better with warmer or cooler climates, some have better disease resistance, and in many, they can change the characteristics of the fruit, with some having more tannin and structure, or variations in aromas and textures. Because of this, winemakers who make Pinot Noir often blend different clones into their wines. This can give the wine balance, utilizing the tannin and structure of one clone with the fruit-forward character of another, and adding another clone that gives the wine a plushness or silkiness. Overarching flavor profiles for Pinot Noir include cherry, raspberry, clove, mushroom, and vanilla. Primary flavors can include black fruit, such as plum, plum sauce, and wild blueberry. Red fruit like cranberry, pomegranate, strawberry, raspberry, black cherry, cherry, dragon fruit, blood orange, and red licorice. Floral notes, such as cotton candy, violet, iris, hibiscus, rose, potpourri, and rose hips. herbal notes of dried herbs. Often you'll find secondary notes that might include cocoa, cream, gun smoke, tobacco leaf, toasted bread, dried leaves, potting soil, mushroom, and truffle. Finally, there are tertiary notes from aging that could be cola, clove, cinnamon, brown sugar, milk chocolate, allspice, and vanilla. Depth and flavor are impacted by the climate. Pinot from warmer climates will be fuller and wider, from cooler climates, elegant and linear. The winemaking also influences the flavors. How ripe were the grapes when they were picked? How much time did the wine spend on skins to absorb the color and flavors? Pinot Noir is also known to age well. This is a wine you will hear people wax poetic over specific vintages. To accompany that beautiful charcuterie board, Steve poured several of his wines and walked us through a tasting.
This is the 777, the Sad Jack 777, named after my two dogs that are dead now, Sadie and Jackson. And this was the wine that we used the indigenous yeast on, and the spontaneous malolactic fermentation. So it's made in a style that a lot of high-end winemakers are making wines in now. And you'll see, because we're going to taste two 18s after it, you'll see the difference when we get to the other 18s.
Just that hint of almost a barnyard kind of a thing, that little bit of a rustic funk that you get out of it,
Right.
more of a savory note.
Sad Jack?
Yeah, more of a savory note.
That's a really good way to describe it when you said the savory note.
Yeah.
There is a savory note
Yeah.
aromatically in that wine, and I think that with that indigenous yeast, you're going to get more of that. We're looking
Interesting.
maybe a little more for the fruit notes
Right,
versus
exactly.
the savory
What's your
notes.
style? Yeah.
It's just more of what we do. We don't mind those savory notes, but we want them to develop in the bottle.
Right.
And that's when I say sandalwood, that's kind of where they go. I mean, sandalwood's kind of a savory note that
Yeah.
they go to. South slopes. The 17 vintage really reminds me of this vintage. It was a hot vintage, a really big fruit set, and so it really slowed ripening down. So and when you have a hot vintage, like if I were tasting these wines in a blind tasting, I'd never guess they came from a warm vintage. I would think they're cool with vintage wines. They really have pretty low pHs and high acidities. So I think they're going to be around a long time. They're probably a more red fruited vintage than we typically do. Mm-hmm. They always remind me a little bit of pomegranate or something. That it's just a little. Most of our wines are more black fruited on the black fruit spectrum. These are a little bit more red fruited. Just that's what you got from the vintage. Yeah, it's really that's very atypical for what we do. So I really like these wines. They almost, if I were tasting them blind, I would maybe guess they were Dundee Hills wines versus Yamhill-Carlton. They're really different so it's a really unique vintage. We've never quite had a vintage like that. 14 was somewhat similar to that, but the wines from 14 were definitely still more dark fruited than these wines. So it's kind of a fascinating vintage, really. There'll be really nice wines that'll be around a long time. I actually love this vintage. It's funny, I always tell consumers here that when I first started this, I would have just been gaga over the 2018 vintage. But I've seen how they age. Like a vintage like this gets to me to be what I really look for. And what I looked for was, I look for that velvety richness, and that will come in these wines eventually. And I look for a lot of fruit, but underneath, I still like them to be, in a way, just light on their feet still. And that's what you get from vintage like this. You'll never get that from the 18 vintage, but they'll always be big, opulent wines, and they'll always be delicious. But so I really love where this vintage is going to go. This is the 16 South Slope. And you can see the difference. This is a moderate vintage, and this is probably the most complex wine we have right now. It's starting to show just the beginnings of our wines. All have this little bit of this sandalwood character as they get older, and it's just starting in this 2016. And I would say that this is one of my favorite vintages we've ever done. It's this 18 and 10 are probably my 3 favorite vintages. This was really an early vintage, but it was really moderate. Everything came early. In fact, we had a very cool August that year. I was worried that we were just going to be ripening in extreme heat. And we were finished harvesting by the middle of September on this vintage. But we got a really cool August and a cool, we had a little bit of heat at the beginning of September, and then it turned cool again. Really a nice year. These wines always remind me, they have, they almost had a kind of a Parma violet thing in the beginning. They were just different. They had this dark fruit and this kind of Parma violet, and they're really pretty vintage, beautifully balanced.
Same vineyard, same winemaking,
different
everything.
year.
I mean,
Everything's the same except the
how
vintage.
distinct.
Right.
I mean,
This is a celestial goddess that I can never remember this goddess's name. I should know that. But anyway, this means Sankalu, which means the 5 elected or the 5 chosen. We were originally going to call this Sankatwal, which means the 5 stars. But there was a winery in Walla called 5 Stars, so we couldn't do it. And this was right before we went to press with this label. So I said, so we just pulled a name change really quick, but we had the label already designed and we left it. But so this is the 5 best barrels from the vintage, 1 from each of our clonal blocks. So it has all 5 clones in it, and it's the best barrel out of each. And this wine's just the big wine that, I always tell people, quite frankly, I tell them, if you're not prepared to age this, at least 5 years, I'm not sure it's the wine for you. You might want to pick one of our other wines, because I really do think it has 5 strong, dominant personalities in it. And I really think that needs time for those personalities to kind of mesh and form their own personality. I think they'll really have a lot of longevity, these wines. It has a lot of tannin. You can smell it has a lot of oak in this wine. This wine is 80% new oak. That's as high as, and that just happened because those were the barrels we liked and those were the barrels we blended.
Wow.
But it can sustain that much oak because it's got a lot of fruit underneath. But the reason I tell them 5 years is because I want that oak to kind of, go into the background a little bit and just mesh with the wine a little bit more. And I really think it's going to take 5 years for that to happen. So.
For our pairing, we had the Lenné Estate 2018 Kill Hill Pinot Noir. The winery noted blackberry, raspberry, and mocha in the aromas and flavors for this vintage, so I ran with that as I composed my recipes. Pinot Noir is often subjugated to lighter meats like chicken, pork, and fish. I knew this wine would have more body than a typical Pinot Noir, so we went with beef, but kept it lighter, doing a bacon-wrapped filet and a pan sauce with a bit of the wine and blackberries. For our side, I wanted to play on the coffee notes in the wine. We roasted carrots in salt and coffee. Well, actually, coffee grounds. This is a great use for your leftover coffee grounds. Bury the carrots in the grounds and roast them. This creates a rich, flavorful side. The bitter notes of the coffee are balanced by the sweetness of the roasted carrots. We finished with a simple salad of spring greens. While this concludes our trip to the Yamhill-Carlton AVA, you can find extras on this region and on Lenné Estate by visiting our YouTube channel. While you're there, take a moment and subscribe. Join us on our next episode when we visit Youngberg Hill in the McMinnville AVA and speak with owner Wayne Bailey about his wines and sustainability on the scenic route.